froze the moment the nurse grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not aggressive, just a firm, quiet pressure, like she was trying to stop me from stepping off a curb without looking. I had just picked up the small paper cup from the tray. 2 pills, same as every morning for the past 3 weeks since my hip surgery. I hadn't even lifted it to my mouth yet. She leaned down close to my ear. The room smelled like floor cleaner and the lavender plug-in my daughter had brought from home to make the place feel less institutional. The nurse's voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't take those, not yet. Can you trust me for the next 10 minutes? I looked at her. She was maybe 40, dark hair pulled back tight, ID badge clipped crooked to her scrubs. I had seen her every day for 2 weeks. She had brought me Tim Hortons on her break once because I mentioned I missed proper coffee. Her name was Stephanie. I set the cup back down on the tray. I had no idea the 10 minutes was going to change everything. I want to go back a little because none of this makes sense without the context of who I am and how I ended up in that hospital bed in the first place. My name is Gerald. No, wait. I need to start over. I keep doing this, starting in the middle. My wife used to laugh at me for it. She would say, "You never tell a story from the beginning. You always start in the fire and then try to explain how you got there." She was right. She was right about most things. My name is not important. What I am is a 67-year-old retired civil engineer from Burlington, Ontario. 41 years I worked. 41 years of highways and drainage systems and environmental assessments and enough paperwork to wallpaper every room in my house 3 times over. I retired at 63 with a pension, a good RRSP, and a plan. The plan was simple. My wife Elaine and I were going to spend our retirement doing all the things we had put off. Prince Edward Island in the summer, Portugal in the fall, maybe a slow train through the Rockies. We had a list on the fridge written in her handwriting with little stars next to the ones she was most excited about. Elaine died 14 months before I ended up in that hospital bed. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. There is nothing I can say about those 11 weeks that would adequately describe them, so I won't try. What I will say is that when she died, I did not know who I was anymore. 42 years of marriage. She was the one who remembered which neighbors had dogs, which grandchildren preferred which birthday cake flavors, which of my medications needed to be taken with food. She kept the whole household running in her head like a quiet and visible operating system. And then she was gone, and I was 66 years old and I did not know where we kept the extra garbage bags. My daughter came home from Calgary to help me through the first month. Her name is Vivian. She is 40 years old, an accountant, sharp as a tack. I was grateful. I leaned on her more than I should have, probably. And her husband came too, eventually. His name is Preston. I want to be careful about how I say the next part because I am still working through it myself. I never fully warmed to Preston. I know how that sounds. Nobody wants to be the difficult father-in-law who never accepted the husband. But it was not about acceptance. Preston is charming. He is very, very charming. He remembers your coffee order and compliments your haircut and laughs at your jokes, even when they are not funny. He is the kind of man who makes you feel, in the moment, like you are the most interesting person in the room. And then you walk away and you realize you don't actually remember him saying anything of substance. Elaine had felt it too. She never said it directly, but once, maybe 4 years ago, she looked at me across the kitchen table after her family dinner and said quietly, "I hope Vivian is happy." Just that. I hope Vivian is happy. The way she said it made it clear she was not entirely sure. After Elaine died, Vivian and Preston started coming to Burlington more often. Every few weeks, then every couple of weeks. I was grateful at first. The house was very quiet. My son lives in Halifax. My son, who I will get to. And he couldn't always get away, so Vivian and Preston would come and help me with things, groceries, paperwork. Preston started helping me with my finances, which, looking back, I should never have allowed. At the time, I told myself it was practical. I had some investment accounts, the house, Elaine's life insurance, my pension. Preston is in financial services. He suggested I consolidate things, simplify the paperwork, make it easier to manage. He used calm, reasonable language. He talked about probate fees and estate efficiency and tax optimization. I understood maybe 60% of what he said, which is exactly how he wanted it. I signed some things, not everything. I wasn't that far gone, but some things. And then I fell. The hip surgery was supposed to be straightforward. Partial replacement, 3 days in hospital, 6 weeks of physiotherapy, good as new. I was in the Oakville Trafalgar Memorial in a semi-private room, and by the second week I was already walking laps of the hallway with a cane. I was healing well. Vivian visited every 2 or 3 days. Preston came with her sometimes. My son, whose name is Callum, called every night from Halifax. He had offered to come, but I had told him not to. He had 3 kids at home, a full-time job, and I felt guilty asking him to upend everything for a hip replacement that was going well. I told him I was fine. I told him Vivian was close by. I did not know then what I know now. The medication change happened in week 2. My attending physician, Dr. Okafor, had adjusted my blood thinner dosage because of a minor clotting concern. It was a small change, a routine adjustment. He explained it to me clearly, and I understood. What I did not know was that someone had also spoken to the nursing staff about my medications. Someone who was not Dr. Okafor. I found this out from Stephanie on the morning she stopped my hand. But before that morning, there were things I had noticed and dismissed, small things. I had mentioned to Preston a few days earlier that I was feeling unusually tired, more than the surgery should account for. He had nodded sympathetically and said it was probably the body working hard to heal. That same afternoon, I noticed my pill cup had 3 pills in it instead of 2. I assumed Dr. Okafor had added something. I did not check. I should have checked. I had also noticed that Vivian, in her last 2 visits, had been quieter than usual. Not sad, exactly. More like careful. The way you are careful when you are carrying something fragile and trying not to let anyone see it. She asked me once out of nowhere whether I had updated my will since her mother passed. I said I hadn't gotten around to it. She said I should. That it was important to have things in order. I said, yes, you're right, I'll look into it. I thought she was being practical. She is an accountant. They think about these things. I was wrong about what she was thinking. Stephanie had been my nurse for most of my stay. She was efficient and no nonsense in a way I appreciated. She didn't hover, didn't over-explain, treated me like an adult. On the morning in question, she had come in for my regular 7 a.m. medication round. She had the little paper cup, same as always, but when she walked in, she didn't hand it to me right away. She stood at the door for a moment, looked at the cup, looked at me. Then she came to the bedside and set the cup down on the tray. And then she said she needed to check something and stepped back out. I didn't think anything of it. I picked up the cup the way you do automatically after 3 weeks of the same routine. And that's when she came back in and put her hand on my wrist. Those 10 minutes she asked for. What she told me, quietly and quickly, with the curtain around my bed half drawn and her voice low enough that the man in the next bed couldn't hear, was this. She had been reviewing my medication chart the night before, preparing for her morning shift. She had noticed a discrepancy. My blood thinner dosage had been adjusted by Dr. Okafor. She had that on file, but there was a second notation on my file, a handwritten addendum that indicated an additional medication had been requested by a family member. The notation referenced a conversation with my daughter. The medication was a sedative added to my regimen 3 days ago. It was not ordered by any physician on my care team. Stephanie had flagged it immediately to her charge nurse. They had pulled it from my rotation and started an internal review. They had also contacted hospital administration, and she told me they had called the police. I stared at her. I remember very distinctly the sound of the breakfast cart in the hallway, the squeak of its wheels. Someone in another room had the television on, It was a Tuesday morning in February, and the light coming through the window was the flat, gray-white light of a Canadian winter, and I felt as though I had stepped off the edge of something I did not know was there. "Requested it," I said. It was not really a question. Some part of me already knew. Stephanie looked at me for a long moment. "We believe it was your son-in-law," she said, "but we needed your consent before we could do anything further. And we needed you not to take anything until we had this conversation." She handed me a glass of water, not the pills, just water. "Your family is listed as your emergency contacts," she said. "Typically that means we share information with them freely. But something about this didn't sit right, and I've been doing this for 17 years. When something doesn't sit right, I've learned to stop and look at it." I drank the water. My hand was not steady. The next few hours were a particular kind of surreal that I do not have adequate language for. A patient liaison came. 2 police officers came, plain clothes, and spoke to me in a small consultation room off the corridor, with a cup of Tim Hortons that nobody touched going cold on the table between us. They were kind, matter-of-fact in the way that people are when they are trying not to alarm you further than you already are. They told me what they had pieced together so far. Preston, it turned out, had been doing a great deal more than simplifying my finances. Over the previous several months, he had been systematically restructuring my accounts in ways that would make it significantly easier for him to access them. Not all at once, nothing obvious, nothing that would trip an immediate alarm. Small movements, renamings, beneficiary adjustments on accounts I hadn't looked at since Elaine set them up. He had also, they believed, been coaching Vivian on what to say and when to say it, including the conversation about my will. The sedative in my medication had not, they thought, been intended to kill me. Not directly, the working theory, and they were careful to say it was a theory they were still investigating. Was that a pattern of confusion and sedation, combined with some of the paperwork they were planning to put in front of me, would have made it very easy to argue later that I had consented to things while my cognitive state was compromised. It was not poison, it was something quieter and harder to prove and in some ways more frightening. I thought about Elaine. I thought about her saying, "I hope Vivian is happy." I thought about my daughter who used to fall asleep on car trips with her head against my shoulder, who I had coached through her first job interview, who I had helped move into her first apartment in Calgary. 3 trips up a narrow staircase with a mattress that would not cooperate, both of us laughing until we couldn't breathe. I asked the officers, did Vivian know all of it? They did not answer that directly. They said the investigation would establish that. What I know and what I've had to live with since is that the answer is probably some of it. Maybe not the medication. I choose to believe not the medication. But the financial maneuvering, she is an accountant. She understood what she was signing. I think she told herself it was just protecting the assets, just being practical, just making sure things were organized. I think Preston is very good at framing things in ways that make them sound reasonable. I think my daughter, who had just lost her mother and was watching her father grieve and get older and need help, made choices she would not have made otherwise. I do not know for certain. What I know is that I am still her father. Callum drove from Halifax. 14 hours overnight, arrived at the hospital at 6 in the morning with a coffee for me and dark circles under his eyes, and sat in the chair next to my bed and didn't say much for a long time. He just sat there. That was enough. Preston was arrested. The charges, and they were significant, included fraud over $5,000, unauthorized access to financial records, and a charge related to the medication that I don't remember the exact legal language for, but that amounted to administering a substance without consent. He has since retained a lawyer and is fighting everything. I do not follow the proceedings closely. My own lawyer does that. Vivian was not charged. The investigation found that she had participated in the financial restructuring, but that the medication had been arranged entirely by Preston without her knowledge. She has since left him. She called me from a friend's place in Mississauga 3 weeks after everything collapsed, and she wept for a long time, and I listened. I did not tell her it was fine because it was not fine. I told her I loved her. I told her this was not fine. I told her this was not the end of us. I meant it. I think I meant it. Some days it is easier to mean than others. The house in Burlington still has Elaine's list on the fridge. I haven't taken it down. Prince Edward Island is still on there, with a little star next to it. This past July, Callum and his wife and their 3 kids and I drove out to PEI together. We rented a house in North Rustico, right on the water. The kids ate so much lobster they turned pink. Callum and I walked the red sand beaches in the evenings and didn't talk much. Just walked. And I thought about Elaine and didn't try to stop myself thinking about her. She would have loved it. She would have put her feet in the water and complained about the cold and done it anyway and laughed. I still have the full list on my fridge. I haven't crossed anything off. Crossing things off feels like finishing. I am not interested in finishing. What I want to say to whoever's listening to this, and I know you're out there because some of you have been with me through other stories and you understand the particular grief of loving someone who betrays you or loving someone who allows themselves to be led into betrayal, is this. Stephanie did not have to stop. She had a full ward, a double shift, 17 years of training that told her to follow the protocol and flag it upward and let administration handle it. She did all of that, but she also stopped. She looked at me like I was a person and not a file. She handed me water instead of the pills, and she told me the truth, and she gave me 10 minutes to understand what was happening around me. I sent flowers to the hospital when I was discharged. She wasn't there that day, but the charge nurse told me she got them. I wrote in the card, "Thank you for looking." Most people don't. The will is updated now. Everything is clear and clean and properly documented. My financial accounts have been reviewed by an independent advisor I selected myself, a woman named Paulette, who has an office in Hamilton and who answers her own phone, which I consider a sign of character. She reviews everything with me line by line, and she does not use jargon, and she does not rush me. My hip healed. I walk 3 kilometers every morning along the lakefront, rain or shine, winter coat, and all in the cold months. And I think about Elaine, and I think about my daughter, and I think about how you can love someone completely and still not know them fully, and how that is one of the most disorienting truths of being alive. I am 67 years old. I am not done. Share what you're thinking in the comments. I read everyone. I keep thinking about the breakfast cart, that squeak of the wheels in the hallway, ordinary and indifferent, while my whole world was shifting underneath me. It's strange the details you hold on to, not the police officers' faces, not the exact words from the lawyer, just that cart moving past my door like nothing had happened, like it was still a normal Tuesday morning in February. I've had a lot of time to think about how things unfolded the way they did. Not in a bitter way, or at least I'm trying not to, more in the way you turn an old piece of wood over in your hands, looking at the grain, trying to understand what made it grow the way it did. What Preston did required a particular kind of calculation, not passion, not even desperation. Calculation. He looked at an old man who had just lost his wife, who was alone and grieving and temporarily dependent, and he saw an opportunity and he organized himself around it. That takes a certain coldness that I don't think I'll ever fully understand. But here's what I've come to believe, that kind of coldness always leaves a trail. It cannot help itself. There are always small inconsistencies, small moments where the math doesn't add up, or something doesn't sit right. Stephanie noticed because she was paying attention. She was looking at me like a person and not a process. If I'd been more alert in those early weeks, less fogged by grief, less willing to let someone else carry the weight, I might have noticed myself. That's not self-blame. I want to be careful about that distinction. What happened was not my fault. But I have learned at 67 that there is a kind of wisdom that only comes from staying present in your own life. Not handing the wheel to someone else because it feels easier. Not signing things you haven't read because you trust the person holding the pen. Elaine used to say, "You only get taken advantage of where you've already stopped paying attention." I thought she was being cynical. She was being accurate. And Vivian, my daughter, that is the part I am still working out, and I suspect I will be working it out for a long time. She is not a villain in this story. She is a woman who loved a man who was better at deception than she was at detecting it, and who made choices she cannot fully take back. What I know is that she called me. She came back. She did not disappear into the wreckage and let me grieve alone. There is something in that, something that takes a different kind of courage than the courage of people who never do wrong in the first place. The courage of someone who has to look at what they allowed and keep standing anyway. I am not the same man I was before Elaine died. I know that. Grief changes the architecture of you, rearranges things that don't go back exactly where they were. But I am still here. I walk my 3 kilometers. I answer my own phone. I read every document before I sign it now, even when it takes twice as long and the person across the table is clearly impatient. Callan drove 14 hours without being asked. Stephanie stopped when she didn't have to. Those 2 facts matter to me more than almost anything else about this whole story, because what they have in common is this: both of them chose to act on what they knew was right, even when doing nothing would have been easier, and even when it cost them something. That is what I want to carry forward, not the bitterness, not the fear. Just that the reminder that integrity is not a feeling, it is a decision, made in small moments, often when nobody is watching. I'm still here, I'm still paying attention,